So, hello, we are going to make a Bolognese sauce today. I have company. This is Ellen,
Hello.
and she's a friend, old friend, long-term friend, rather than old.
Very young at heart.
Known each other a long time from Morris, and she's going to help to have a conversation today while I make a Bolognese sauce about managing relationships. Very tricky subject, and this is hopefully the first of a series of talks.
Yeah.
That's what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to start making the Bolognese sauce.
You go on, and I'll ask you questions then.
That's the plan.
So we were having a walk the day, and you were telling me, well, we were both talking about our families, weren't we, and how we were managing our families, managing relationships. Does that make sense?
Families are, I think, the hardest because we usually spend the most time with them, but also they know where all of our little weak spots are very early on, and it's very easy for them to focus in our sore bits emotionally.
Yeah.
If they're not getting their own way.
Yeah.
So that's not just children, that can be partners.
Yeah.
As well. I mean, and sometimes friends can do it as well, not necessarily on purpose, but we can get poked by pretty much anybody really, work colleagues. Sometimes somebody on a bus, might say or do something that just ruffles all of our feathers.
And I think we were also saying that it's difficult because we love those people and actually we'll do anything for them, won't we? We'll bend over backwards, won't we? And sort of sacrifice ourselves sometimes.
That can cause a problem because it can cause an imbalance of power in the relationship. And there is always power that gets played with any relationship. It doesn't matter what kind of relationship, there's always a toing and a throwing and a giving and a taking. And some relationships are happy and balanced and other relationships aren't.
Yeah.
And with family, I think it's harder to get that balance than obviously a work colleague or somebody who you wouldn't be so heavily involved in emotionally.
Yeah. And I think it's difficult. I mean, I suppose we could be described as the matriarchs of our families.
We are now.
Does that make us sound ancient?
Well, only if you call us old crones.
Well, I'm a crone. I'm not necessarily an old crone, but I am a crone, I believe, yes. Yeah, so we were talking about both modelling relationships with our families and sometimes having to intervene. Is that right?
Yes, I mean we have got some very hard-earned wisdom and knowledge and experience, yeah, and it's hard-earned as well. Quite often, as much as we can be professionals and we've got jobs and we help people manage their relationships, that's certainly what I've done for a living when I was a therapist for 20 years. It's part of my ministry when I'm going to have to wipe my eyes because of the onions. And then you do it in your job as well. But it actually doesn't always help when we get home.
Yeah, well, we often can't follow our own good advice, can we?
I think the closer the relationship is, I think the harder it is for us to perhaps see the imbalances or the unhealthy behaviour. That's either our own or somebody else's. And that's what makes relationships so tricky. it's much easier to look at the other person in the relationship and look at all of the things they're doing wrong than it is for us to look at ourselves.
Yeah. I think that's a universal, isn't it?
Obviously, yeah. Well, talking generally anyway, I don't think there's anything that we're going to discuss that's unique to any one person. It's unlikely because people behave in certain patterns, and those patterns can be seen, recognised, and they can be changed if they need to be, but only if the person wants to.
Yeah.
And that's another big sticking point for relationships, when you want somebody to change their behaviour and they're not interested. Because they don't think there's anything wrong, they're not willing to put the effort in. Combination of lots of different reasons, but most people just stay the same.
Well, I think that's also an advantage of being a crone, is that we're able to sort of work on ourselves a bit if we want to.
More space, don't we?
And we've got some sort of, we can look back at our situations sometimes, and you know, do some positive work to change how we present to the world or how the world treats us as well.
There's an opportunity as we get older to get the space, the head space, it's quite often, as well as physical space, to check ourselves, but also to check how we're interacting with the world as well.
And how have you done that, would you say?
How have I done that? Well, I've been studying one way or the other my entire adult life. I started my first course, sort of adult learning, when I was about 21. And I'm 52 now, so I've been constantly looking at how I interact with the world. Each time I learn something and apply it, I sort of become a slightly better version of myself. Now, if you knew me when I was a child, I would still be recognisable. There's certain things you just can't change, fundamentally who you are.
And that's a good thing. That's good.
I mean, I'm not looking to fundamentally change who I am, but just improving things. And how I've done that is by increasing my awareness. And that each decade is, you know, it's noticeable.
Yeah, I agree, because I've known you for some years now.
Yeah, yes.
And I've noted that.
Yeah, and I recognise it as a bit of a softening around the edges. You know, the spiky bits aren't quite so spiky. And we've all got reasons for our spikes. You know, they're a good protection against things, but quite often they can cause problems as well as protect us. So it's just, I think each individual person can take responsibility for their part that they play in any relationship. That's what I believe fundamentally. And that blaming somebody else, whether it's somebody from the past who mistreated you or your current partner or a work situation or
your ex,
anybody else really, or even situational. If you think sometimes people blame the situation for their behaviour, that's usually unhelpful. We want it to be helpful, and I think looking at ourselves first and just asking what part we've played in any situation is a good place to start.
Owning it, I call it.
Yeah.
Owning it, yeah.
Owning it, that's good. Yeah. Are you doing that more as you get older?
I think so. Owning things, yeah.
Or have you always done it?
No, I don't. I think you get better at it, don't you, as you get older? And I'm not perfect now, but I think possibly I am doing it a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah,
I tell you something I am doing a bit more as I'm getting older, or since I've had children, actually since I've had teenagers, is having to stand back and think I am the adult,
yes.
which has helped me bypass a few arguments, possibly.
A lot of people forget that they're adults, particularly during a conflict.
Yeah.
They tend to resort to almost like a sort of what they perhaps would have done with their siblings when they were
Yeah.
growing up,
Yeah.
or and they can, people can use dirty tricks to try and get their own way if they've been if they feel a bit threatened, or if they think that they are having to defend themselves. They can be quite mean.
Yeah.
And that is never, never good in a relationship, because that builds up resentment. Resentment is probably one of the worst things a relationship can harbour. Because that resentment tends to bubble away in the background, and it tends to turn up at all sorts of opportunities. And you think something's been let go of, and it really hasn't. It's still right there, ready to come out. When emotions are high.
Do you think you can still do that? Or do you think?
Stir my onions. Hang on.
Yeah, you stir that. It's a nice sizzling noise.
If it was smell-o-vision, you could smell my nice onions and my garlic.
Well, I might be crying at this point. I might be crying at this point, like you are.
I think I'm going to open the back door a little bit because the fan's too noisy. What were you going to say? Sorry?
Are you still guilty of reactive behaviour, do you think? Or do you get reactive in your head and you can hold it off? Or do you get reactive and then apologise later for being reactive? What do you do?
What do I do? Well, each time I've become aware of something, it becomes much, much easier to then break the old pattern. So I've always focused on improving my awareness, so that the change becomes permanent, given time and a bit of practice. So I try not to, because if you try and change something without there being a reason to, it's too hard. You'll do it for maybe 2 weeks, because you've got to put a huge amount of effort in.
Absolutely.
And then you just revert. And then everyone involved is frustrated. So for me, I think it has to be awareness, bringing your attention to something, and then wanting to do something differently, better, potentially. And then that gives you and it's not motivation in terms of, doing physical fitness, but there's a motivation to want to do it differently. That's where I've always put my focus, and that's where I've always tried to impart for other people, that if you want a permanent change, if you want things to genuinely improve, look at yourself first. If you want peace in the world, start with yourself. I think that's Buddha that said that. I'm not taking credit. So I've always done that.
And do you think people have reacted with you favourably as a result?
I think every time I soften, every relationship that I have potentially can benefit from it. I mean, it doesn't always work. Some people are not always happy with change. Some people are not happy with you taking responsibility for yourself, because then that means that you're effectively asking the same question of them, aren't you?
Mm.
And some people really, really don't want to do that. So it can backfire, but generally speaking, you wouldn't have had a healthy relationship with that person anyway. If they're not willing to take responsibility for themselves, the chances are it's not healthy. And then you have to make the decision whether you can cope with that or whether it's actually better for you to not have that relationship. So taking responsibility for yourself is quite hard because it has consequences in the same way that not taking responsibility for yourself has consequences as well. So either way, there are consequences.
At the end of the day, you can't control how other people think, can you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can only bring yourself to the table and then see what happens. Just doing some more chopping. I've got putting my peppers in. This is a vegetarian bolognese.
Oh, nice, yeah.
With the exception that it's got a bit of bone broth in it. So only because I'm not a vegetarian.
No.
But I use vegetarian mince.
Soya, is that?
Corn. Using today because I think it holds its texture a bit more. And there's a lot of nutritional value in everything that I'm putting into it. So the mince itself is really just there for a bit of protein and a bit of texture.
Yeah, I do a nice bolognese with the brown lentils and red wine, which is quite nice.
Oh, yeah, this has got red lentils in it.
Okay. So,
hot. Right, time for the garlic.
do you think you're able to give guidance to the younger?
Sorry?
Do you think you're able to give guidance to our younger family members on relationships?
Only if they want it.
Yeah.
You know, they've got to be willing to accept that you perhaps have got something worth saying. I've got younger family members, and some of them are much better at taking advice than others. I have somebody who reacts to me very poorly, and everything that comes out of my mouth, they pretty much do the opposite. So I just keep my mouth shut now. It's just not worth having a conversation. And then other people have actively rung me, sort me out, you know, to find me. And they will understand that I've got at least 20 years experience. Obviously they're younger, but also I have made that commitment to keep looking, keep growing, keep evolving. And that's not something a lot of people do. A lot of people's personalities are set fairly early on, and then they just stay that way. I don't see any reason for it to change. Yeah, too much.
Do you think there's a difference in the sexes there, or do you think not necessarily? There's just as many women as men stuck in their ways, do you think?
I think that's less clear than it used to be. When I was working, and I haven't worked now as a therapist, I haven't
done any paid work.
When people came, I would say it was 90% females that came, but that is all changing now, and I have male relatives who are quite happy to come and talk to me. and I've encouraged it rather than the situation getting out of hand at home. So I'd rather they ring me than have a screaming match at home. So that's it, you know. I don't think things are as cut and dried as they used to be in that, and each generation is kind of bringing its own change with it. And the younger generations that find it much easier to go and speak to a counsellor or a therapist, and I also think they're a lot more available than they used to be. You can get them through work, through school, colleges, and they weren't there when we were younger.
No, absolutely not.
Did they?
No.
If they did, I wasn't aware of them. Correct me.
No. Oh, well, I would say not. No counsellors, that sort of thing at my school in the 80s.
So I think that people are, the younger generation of either sex seem to be a lot more comfortable talking to people about the things that have made them uncomfortable in their lives. And I can only see that as a good thing.
Me too.
As a therapist, I suppose I'm a little bit biased, but I think communication is the answer to nearly every single problem. You know, I think most problems in the world are misunderstandings because the communication's not been clear. And I think communication is the solution to most things. Just stirring my meats in. So good
what
work
do you think,
with your arms, big Bolognese.
what do you think the basis of good communication is then?
Depends what you are trying to achieve. So give me an example.
Well, I'm just thinking about, you know, say two people who have been in a relationship and are fighting tooth and nail about getting their own point across.
Right, okay. So in that situation, it's unhealthy communication if all they're doing is focusing on trying to get their point of view across. So they need to take in turns. That's part of communication, is listening and talking. We've got 2 ears, 1 mouth, that kind of thing. And in the situation where people are just determined to get their point of view across and they're not willing to listen, it's just going to lead to frustration all round, because the other person, chances are they're going to resist that very demand, and it becomes demanding rather than a request. Communication needs to be more gentle, a request rather than a demand. So in that situation, they have got to step back a bit of space, and genuinely listen to the other person. One of the best questions you can ask somebody in any situation is, what do you need? Because a lot of people make a lot of noise about a lot of things and have no idea what they need.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
So if you stop and ask them what they need, they have to stop. What is it I need?
Yeah.
And you might find it's something quite simple. There might be a quite immediate thing that could ease the situation. And quite often, just by being heard, just by being given the space to be seen as a person, and have that question asked is enough.
Yeah.
I remember years ago in the Morris side, there was a lady who was actually quite mean, and I got upset one day, and you sat with me and you just acknowledged how I felt. You said, I know. And that's another one. That's just another simple statement that helps. You are seen, you are heard, you are acknowledged. So it's that gentleness, and that was very reassuring. And you didn't even have a solution. There wasn't one particularly available straight away. But just by you acknowledging that it had upset me, you weren't even agreeing with me either. You weren't taking sides. You weren't forming battle plans. You weren't doing anything. It was very simple, very elegant, if you like. And you just said, I know. And that reassured me at the time, which calmed the whole situation down. It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There are some very basic things that we can learn to improve any relationship. Most people want to be acknowledged in some way, that they matter, that they're not just somebody who cooks and cleans and just goes to work to pay the mortgage, or just, just anything. Most of us want to be acknowledged in some way.
And appreciated, I think.
Appreciation might be too much at that stage. It depends on how healthy the relationship is and how unhealthy it is. Right, so I'm going to start putting some salt in there because it's getting a bit dry.
Are you using passata or?
I'm using passata, yes.
Oh, lovely, yeah.
Yeah, and there'll be tomato puree and some liquid stock cube, which is basically what bone broth is. Well, you could use vegetarian if you wanted to, or you can use meats if you want to. I think it's up to you. This is something that needed to be done, and I find it less awkward while I do something.
Yes, and what do we call that?
Oh, you keep telling me what this is called.
One of my favourite phrases.
Situational.
No.
What is it?
Secondary intersubjectivity.
Oh, say it again.
Secondary intersubjectivity.
It's just my brain just doesn't remember that. Why doesn't it remember it? So I'm going to have to write it down. But then I'll forget why I've written it down.
Yeah.
Can you explain that then, what that is?
So it's the act of concentrating on one task and being able to talk freely while you're doing it. So it works well with teenagers. And if you're thinking about having a teenager in the car and you're driving somewhere and you're concentrating on driving and you're not actually facing them and sort of putting the pressure on, they tend to talk more freely. Rather than asking something specific and looking at them and putting the pressure on them.
Yes, it's saying, look at me when I'm talking to you, which is not helpful.
Yeah. So if you're concentrating on something else, you're more likely to be, more likely to tell the truth, I think, because you sort of don't think about your reactions as much.
Subjective what? No,
Secondary.
Secondary.
Intersubjectivity.
Secondary intersubjective. Could it not just be something a bit simpler than that? I can't remember that.
Well, we can make up your own Tara phrase, I'm sure.
I might have to, just to, be able to live with that. But it is useful, and I have used it, and definitely the example of teenagers in the car, where you can have perhaps a slightly less awkward conversation about things, because you're not, as you say, you're not facing each other. And for me, I just like to have something to do.
Yeah.
With my hands, and this was due. I haven't got any bolognese left in the freezer. This does about 20 portions.
Okay, I was wondering, because you did put a lot of ingredients in there, I noticed. Yeah.
About 20 portions, and in that, I can turn it into a chili. It can obviously be a lasagna, and just bolognase. I never just make one bolognese.
You could have it on a baked potato as well, couldn't you?
Oh, on a nice jacket potato, yeah, that would work.
Yeah.
If you're not into pasta.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who's not into pasta though.
No, I don't really either. No.
So if you could talk to your younger self, maybe 20, 25, something like that. I mean, you can go back further if you want. But what is that hard won information, knowledge, wisdom that you have gained that you would like her to know?
I would say be less self-conscious and don't give a fig what other people think of you. Because, you're not going to be liked by everybody.
That's a hard one when we're younger, because
it's easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah. But maybe if we could be told by somebody that everything that we think is important now isn't anywhere near as important as it becomes later on.
Yeah, but that's like explaining to, or trying to explain to somebody how difficult it is to have a newborn baby.
That's true.
They don't know. You can't explain to people. You can't explain the wholeness of it, can you?
No, there's only so much reading and learning and observing other people before you just got to have a go yourself and then realise what it's about.
What about you? What would you tell your younger self, would you say?
Self-consciousness is, I think, a thing that we all feel when we're younger. Certainly, we feel like our skin is transparent in some way. So that's one thing. But for me, my own personal story, I would say to my younger self, it's okay to have boundaries. That's quite a strong one, I understand. But it wasn't always very clear what a boundary was and how to kind of protect that boundary when I was younger. And I would try to get her to see that she needs to protect those boundaries, but doesn't have to do it in an aggressive way, because then, you can turn into the very person that you needed protecting from in the first place. That took me a long time to figure that out, that there are gentler ways of standing up for yourself when you need to. There were times when I didn't need to, and I still did it because I was kind of proving a point that I could. So that was a lot of work.
Sounds exhausting. Exhausting.
Do you know, it was quite tiring, because not everything needs to be defended, not everything needs to be protected. You can just walk away from a situation without a single word. And without a reaction. not everything needs to be, we don't need to engage with everything all the time, because that is exhausting. An opinion on everything can be exhausting. Because once you've got an opinion, you have to then defend it. That's the thing about an opinion. You have to take a stance. You then have to stand up against other people who think something different. It is very absorbing. It does keep you occupied. I don't do that anywhere near as much as I used to. When I was younger, I did it an awful lot, and that kind of makes you a bit spiky and a bit prickly.
I think some, as women, sometimes we have to present as spiky or prickly.
Yeah.
Or just that we feel the need to be, because, why should women be lovely and jolly and kind 24/7, which is what society expects of us?
Do you think it still does?
Yes, I do. Absolutely do. I read something yesterday that men are expected to do, women are expected to be.
Okay.
I
wonder if the younger generation, my grandson's generation, he's just a teenager at the moment, so obviously 2 generations away from me, whether he still has that. I'd like to think he hasn't actually got that expectation, and hopefully the girls in that generation don't have that either. I don't know.
I don't think things are changing for the better for women at the moment in society.
Well, we can have everything.
Backlash.
I've noticed we can have everything, but I think that just translates into we can do everything.
Yeah, we expect you to do everything. Yeah.
Not the same thing.
Yeah, and people have an opinion. If you have a baby, or you're expected to, provide for it. But if you don't have a baby, well, why aren't you having a baby? There's a natural thing for women to do. Why can't we just be and do what we do and not be questioned on it?
Yeah, I don't think we've evolved that far as a society, not yet.
I don't either.
There's still a lot of roles and rules for both genders as well.
Yeah, part of my feminist values are, to encourage men to break out too, and be as emotional as they need to be and express themselves.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, him who is recording, he said the pressure to be a provider was with him from when, obviously as a role model from his dad, but from society, you can't shirk.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to provide and have a very strong work ethic, even when you don't feel like it.
Yeah.
And you kind of got to drag your weary body out of bed at God knows what time in the morning to go and put food on the table. And as much as women do work now, even now, obviously with pay gap differences and the fact that women still do much of the caregiving and their career is usually secondary.
Until the husband leaves them, and then they have to, be a provider as well, 24/7.
Yeah, obviously that can happen. It's quite probably more common than we realise. Don't know what the percentages are, but probably they're scary, aren't they? Do you know what the percentages are?
No, I don't know offhand though.
No.
I am a member of a forum on Facebook, Working Mums Forum.
Oh, right.
The amount of stories, of men just leaving willy-nilly and, trying to shirk their supportive, financial responsibilities, through courts and any other way possible. It's phenomenal.
I wonder if that's a backlash from that societal pressure to be the provider. I wonder if that's them
Possibly, yeah.
rebelling, not excusing them, obviously, but is that not that old cliche of, like a midlife crisis when, they cut their hair and buy some kind of inappropriate vehicle. It's not always a motorbike, but can be. And just, I wonder if that's them trying to show shrug the shackles of that expectation for them to be a provider and be stoic and kind of not make a fuss. And
yeah, I hear that, but especially down south where we are,
yeah,
in order to afford a house, often you do need two incomes.
yeah.
And I'm so glad I've got my career to fall back on, to be able to be a provider for my daughter and my granddaughter who lives with me. And
Yes,
also my son needed a bit more financial help at uni.
Say that last bit again.
Also, my son who's needed a bit more financial help at uni recently.
Right, yeah, so the pressure's on you now.
Yeah.
Which is all well and good if you're fit and healthy and you can manage it.
Yeah.
But not everybody's got a career, a profession. They might have a job.
And we are expected to work until we're at least 68 now, is it?
I think for our age group it's 67.
Right. And actually I've just signed up for a mortgage that means I'm going to be paying my mortgage until I'm 70.
Really? So you're going to have to work till you're 70?
Yeah.
Right.
Joy?
Yeah, I don't think you're alone.
No, I don't think I am alone now.
No.
But I'm just thankful that, I'm in a position where I can afford a mortgage on my own now.
Well, and the thing is that as much as the pressure's on you now, you don't want to stay with somebody who makes you miserable.
No.
Because the thing about communication, going back to the theme of the kind of the day, you can't have a relationship, you can't have a healthy relationship with somebody who's not willing to accept responsibility for their part. You can have a relationship, but it won't be healthy, not unless they put their hands up when they need to, when they're, when they've been out of order, when they've not been listening, when they've been grumpy, or tired, or hungry, or hormonal, or
or even have the ability to express when they're not happy.
If somebody knows that you're in a bad mood because of a certain reason that's nothing to do with you, it's much easier to leave them to it. If you automatically assume that it's you, then you feel like you've got to get involved, defend yourself, try and find solutions, or just shout at them back. That's quite a nice, easy solution to it. But if you are living with somebody who doesn't see any reason why they need to change because there's nothing wrong with them, you're just bashing your head against a brick wall. And as much as you are now the main breadwinner, that's got to be preferable to living with somebody who.
Yeah. And I think a lot of women are in that situation, actually. And I think there's a lot of single older women as well, because they're not leaping back into relationships, because they're, doing what they want to do, loving themselves, and you know,
Yeah.
being happy.
Go on. Yeah, being happy.
Yeah.
Relationships do require compromise, and again, that's not something some people are willing to do. One of my other friends, when they were going through a rough patch, he just said, "Well, this is just the way I am."
Yeah.
Can't go anywhere with that, can you?
No, but very rigid thinking, that, isn't it?
Yeah. Not looking at that, you know. Let's meet in the
Why am
middle.
I like that? And
Pardon?
why am I like that? And what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can I make this easier on myself and everybody around me?
Mm.
And that takes that awareness, but it takes a commitment to actually feeling uncomfortable about something that you might have done that has actually had a negative impact on someone else. Much, much easier just to keep on blaming everybody else. But it doesn't work, not if you want to have a healthy relationship.
Mm.
So I have been trying with my boys. We've only ever had boys in the family. I mean, there are some nieces, but they live in Wales, and we don't see them regularly. But so all the boys in the family who I see regularly, I've always been trying to get them to ask the question, what part do I play in this?
Mm.
And one of the members of our family has actually kind of gone the other way a bit much and taken responsibility for things that are not his.
Right.
And I've had to try and kind of work with him and say, that's not yours. You know, you don't need to take responsibility for that, because the children can unfortunately do that.
Mm.
If they don't have good communicators as parents, particularly if the parents split up, the children can look at the situation and conclude, because they don't have any better information, that it's their fault.
Mm.
So I'm currently working with, not all the time, but you know, when I see a situation and that I think they're taking responsibility for it and it's not theirs, I will pick up on it and say, this isn't yours. So it can go the other way as well. But that happens a lot less than people not taking responsibility. In my experience anyway. I don't know, has that been your experience?
Or is that a younger teenage thing?
What, taking responsibility or not?
Yeah, you know, taking too much on their shoulders. I'm not sure. I'm just thinking about it as we're talking here. I don't know. Or is it personality thing?
I think it's personality. I think
do you?
that if you have an irresponsible parent, the chances are you're going to take on too much responsibility. For example, that is an example. It's not the only explanation, but it is an example. Irresponsible parents do usually lead to, you've only got to think of Absolutely Fabulous. And is it Safi, the daughter?
Yeah.
It's a kind of natural reaction to an imbalance.
Yeah, I had a bit of a Safi Adina moment, a few Safi Adina moments when my daughter was growing up, and sort of when I was rediscovering myself after relationship breakdown. And she did do a couple of mothering moments on me, you know, and you know, she made me tell her when I was going to be home, you know, that sort of thing. Like, no, I worry if you're not home.
Oh, really?
No. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, occasionally it's not a problem.
Yeah.
But it's when it's always that way and there's no flexibility.
Yeah.
That's when problems can arise. I've got one more of those. I think I might be putting the right amount of tomato puree in.
Is that what you're putting in now, puree?
Yeah, there's different size jars to what I normally have. So.
I usually have the squeezy things.
Yeah, I tried to buy as many things in jars, like glass jars and tins.
Okay. So you can recycle them.
just because of the recycling element to it. It's also organic, so that I try and get the best quality ingredients I can. Because again, that's something that I can do now. You know, you tend to. We've kind of spread our cooking now to include the best quality ingredients because we can. Way that we couldn't when we were feeding lots of people. We just had to get bulk food, you know.
So you must have a big enough freezer to fit all these bits and pieces in then as well.
Well, I do. My freezer, the remit, the condition of having a new fridge freezer was I needed a freezer big enough to put a dead body in. And it is.
Okay.
So these go in little pots, you know, and then that's much easier to find space for. But if I know I'm doing something like this, then I'll use stuff up in the freezer so I've got space.
I've got lots of parsnips to use up.
Yeah. You could make a parsnip soup.
I think that's what I'm going to do. Yeah, curried parsnip soup, I'm thinking.
Yeah. I'm just going to. So I don't like the texture of aubergine particularly, but I think it's another vegetable, different coloured vegetable to go in. So I grate it.
Did you put peppers in as well?
Yes, bell peppers have gone in, mushrooms, onions, tomato puree, passata, mixed herbs. I put a bit of paprika in mine, a bit of coriander in mine, red lentils. I will put the recipe up on the video. Trying to keep my bananas separate so that they don't make them all go brown. I keep being
separate from the aubergines.
No, my bananas. I've got two separate piles of bananas. I keep being donated bananas from the neighbours so that they end up with a banana cake, you know.
Oh, right, okay, that's kind of them, yeah.
I'll just do this as quickly as I can. Aubergine bits flying everywhere.
Is that a whole aubergine you're putting in then?
Two
whole aubergines, wow.
Because it's a big batch.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot, but it actually isn't when you've got it grated in a big batch. I mean, there's 4 packets of mince in here.
So when I first started cooking with aubergine, the advice was to cut it finely and salt it, and then put kitchen roll on top to soak up some of the fluid. But we don't tend to bother nowadays, do we?
I haven't got any salt in this actually.
All right.
Even in the bone broth, I don't put any salt in. I think it was just a sort of throwback from when I had very small people in the house, and you don't give them salt, do you?
No.
So I've just learned to use other flavours and not salt.
No. We used to wash the salt off. It was to draw out the fluid. But I mean, it just adds to the salt taste, doesn't it?
I think it'll be okay in there. I've done this before. I've done this dozens of times.
I know, I'm not criticising you. I'm just saying it's funny how we used to do that, but we don't anymore.
Yeah, I don't use salt.
No.
But then I don't really use aubergine either. I only to use it in this recipe. It's not. I'm not sort of a moussaka fan or anything like that.
A what fan?
Moussaka.
Yeah, that's what I used to make it in.
I used to have.
Make a
I remember when I travelled to Marrakesh, I did have grilled aubergines at the market, the night market, because there wasn't a lot of options for me. I was a vegetarian at the time. The vegetarianism wasn't really an option back then. It probably is now. It was a long time ago I went. So think I've put everything in now that needs to go in. This will just need to be cooked up for a couple of hours on low. Make sure everything's all mixed in. One of the good things about doing recipes in bulk is that you get a development of flavour that you don't get if you make one batch at a time. So that's a nice big batch of bolognese. Once all the lentils have disappeared, then it's done pretty much. That's the indicator, so it's just another bit of protein in there. But everybody eats this, everybody likes this.
Well, there's not a huge amount of iron in corn, so probably adding lentils to it's probably a good thing.
Have they got iron then?
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. There's bone broth's probably got iron in it. So
Yeah.
I should think. Right, so that is, I'm just going to check my recipe, but I think I have done everything. I will write that out properly because there's some things I don't put in, some things I have put in, and sometimes I do a veggie passata and sometimes I don't, you know. Got to be a bit flexible with these things. Depends what you've got in the house quite often.
Well, it's the same as relationships, isn't it? You've got to be a bit flexible.
Yeah.
Nice segue.
That was a nice segue. I don't know if people do that as much. I don't know. Everybody seems to be jumping up and down about something these days. And, you know, kind of taking a stand and having a position. And, you know, there seems to be a lot of frustration. And, I mean, obviously, we're still in the, where are we now? Third lockdown? Coming out a bit soon, hopefully. Although, as far as I can see, everyone's just carrying on as normal.
Yeah.
And I think they've given up on lockdown. We're still doing it because
I was going to say, you and I aren't, are we? We're following it.
We've got people who need to be protected, and so we're being sensible. Which again takes effort. You know, one of the things about what we've been asked to do as individuals is think about others.
Yeah.
And some people have a lot of trouble with that.
Yeah. And people don't, well, I think, I don't like to say it, but it's, you know, since Thatcher reared her ugly head, she made the famous comment about no individual, we're all individuals, there's no society anymore.
Oh, is that what she said?
Yeah.
Now, you see, I love Margaret Thatcher because when she came in, I was still being forced to drink lukewarm whole milk from the school.
Right.
And she was Thatcher, the milk snatcher, wasn't she? And the only thing I was interested in is that she took the milk away. And I was eternally grateful because it used to make me feel sick.
But I think, you know, this is why people don't want these immunisations that are being offered, because they say, well, I don't want it. There's no, you know, there's no big understanding of this is what herd immunity is about. It's protecting the most vulnerable in society who can't have the vaccines, you know, and it's not a general understanding of that. And this is where the anti-vaxxers are as well. They don't understand about protecting, you know, society of most vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the same with masks as well. I think this is the argument from a rational person is wear a mask.
Yeah.
Because it's not about you.
Yeah.
And again, that's your relationship as a wider like that society that apparently doesn't exist. It still does.
Yeah.
We need to be responsible members of society. You don't have to like it.
We need to look after each other, don't we?
Well, I believe so. But it's one of those contentious issues that if you try and have a conversation with somebody who is at the polar opposite to where you are, you're on a hiding to nothing. Because nobody's going to budge and nobody's going to change their position because everybody thinks they're being reasonable.
Yeah.
So that's something I have stopped doing as I've got older. As soon as I realise I'm not having a rational conversation,
Yeah.
I just stop. I just think I'm not going to waste my time or my energy on trying to convince you of something that you ought to have figured out by yourself anyway.
Yeah.
And that's wisdom has given me that experience has made me realise you've got to pick your battles.
Yeah.
And I have a lot less battles as I'm older, because I just think it's not worth it sometimes, you know, because you think that you've got a kind of responsibility to have that conversation, but only if they're receptive.
Yeah.
And, you know, as much as I might think I'm being rational and reasonable, maybe I'm not.
Yeah.
It's always a possibility, you know. It does happen. So I'm just going to have to stir this regularly so it doesn't stick to the bottom. But that will just cook up slowly now. It's 3:30 now. It'll probably be ready for dinner. Probably have some. Do you want to have a look at it? That's about what it needs to look like at this stage. Right, shall we do this again?
Yes, let us.
It's much easier doing it this way for me, anyway.
Yeah. Well, and now I've downloaded Skype.
Yeah, get you.
Got the handle of it. Yeah. I mean, that's the good thing about Zoom or Microsoft Teams, is that the other person doesn't have to download it. But, you know, that's as far as I can see.
You've done it once. I don't understand Teams. I know I've been invited to a meeting before now, but I think I did have to download something for it. Yeah, I think I did. I had to download an app. I'm sure I did.
Did you? I use it with my clients, and they don't have to. They just have to accept it.
But
the invitation.
You're sending them an invitation, I think.
Yeah. You do need an invitation, yeah.
Yeah. So we are keeping up with technology.
Yeah.
Even though for me it's always a bit of muttering when I have to learn something new.
Well, it's me as well. So shall we do this next week, do you think?
Yes, I'll see. Obviously, I need to do something. I prefer to do it this way so that I'm kind of not in the spotlight.
Secondary subjectivity.
Go on, say it again.
Secondary into subjectivity.
I wonder if I remember if I remember the first word, would I remember the second one? Ask me next week, see if I remember it. And what I'll do is I'll just write it on my kitchen wall.
Yeah, okay.
Just there.
By me.
So when you test me, I'll pass.
No testing. No testing, no judgment.
All right, my darling. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. It was very enjoyable.
I learned how to do this on Skype. There you go.
I am very hungry now. Hang on. Is that your whole screen that you did for me?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. All right. I don't know how to put the phone down. Oh yeah, there's a red thing.
I'll do it.
I can do it.
Love you. See you soon.
Bye. Bye.